Hello and welcome back to the Wandering Cantos. I feel like I'm a little late to the party on today's video, but if I'm being honest, I sort of felt like I needed to upgrade my abilities before making this video. I think that ultimately it's actually easier to analyze and study sadder material. It's the more chaotic, fun, upbeat, sort of comedic stuff that's actually a real challenge at times. But I think I've looked at enough other songs to be ready for this one. So yeah, without any further ado, let's begin our study of OYOME HOLIC by Nerissa Ravencroft. Alright, so our introduction goes, sniff, sniff, sniff. Oh, I know this smell. It belongs to my darling. Much more of it, and I'll be smothering you in kisses. Oh, wait, my love. I can't stop. Rissa's almost there. So in this beginning passage, we don't have any rhymes, and it's sort of interesting because what I'm going to keep in mind this time around is that one of Nerissa's stylistic choices is in her sort of like line notes. She sometimes doesn't actually include a line break where she intends a line break, but here that might not be the case since this is the intro and I'm not seeing any internal rhymes. Normally, if you're seeing an internal rhyme, if smell and darling rhymed as an example, you would know that there was technically a line break intended there. That being said, there is some interesting musicality with sort of the repeating of this S sound. So we have sniff, sniff, sniff. Oh, I know this smell. It belongs to my darling. Much more of it, I'll be smothering you in kisses. Oh, wait, my love, I can't stop. Rissa's almost there. There's also some repetition of the M with much more and smothering you. So we're getting some musicality still there, even though we're not having, direct rhymes, let's say. Now, in terms of an actual line-by-line analysis, I think something that's really interesting is sort of this play that we're going to see throughout this whole thing of there's like some sort of like obsessive lover vibes, let's say. And at first you might think like, oh, well, this is just sort of a, just a silly introduction to sort of get you into the sort of silliness of, oh, wait, my love, sort of chasing you down. However, I think something that's really interesting that's being done here is that the speaker here, which is Rissa, is not actually telling us some of these sensory details. So sensory details are details that you can observe through your senses. So when you're writing, people often say to include these to make a scene more memorable or immersive. So, you might actually describe how your lover's hair smells. Maybe it smells like their lavender shampoo, or maybe they were just baking, so they smell like cinnamon and vanilla. You'd also describe how they look. Again, if they're baking, maybe they have some flour on their cheek, or, you could describe that they're wearing a sweater with their sleeves rolled up and they have an apron that's, has batter on it and stuff like that. You would also describe what you can feel. Maybe you can feel the warmth of the oven. You can feel, the warmth of the kitchen in general because of the residual heat of the oven. Maybe if they have a pie cooling on a windowsill, you can actually feel the breeze come in. And then as you describe the breeze that's coming in, you can describe that the breeze carries the smell of the blueberry pie on it. That kind of thing. You would also describe what you can hear. Maybe you can hear the dishwasher running because they just finished cleaning up after baking. So those are all sensory details. And those sensory details bring your reader into the moment. It's sort of you're sharing the moment with the reader. And, like I said, as I just described all of those baking things, maybe you started to see a kitchen. And one of the, really interesting things about poetic writing is even though I might have been describing a very specific kitchen, you were probably able to use those sensory details and apply them to kitchens you have seen in your life, and it started to make you, maybe you were remembering your old grandma's kitchen or some sort of nostalgic baking memory or something. It's sort of the great sort of contradiction and paradox of the more detail you include, the more relatable something becomes, because you would think that the more detail you include, the more specific it is, the more people won't be able to relate to a very specific memory. Now, why does that matter here? Well, here we get sniff, sniff, sniff. Oh, I know this smell. It belongs to my darling. So it belongs to my darling. There's the possessive of my. It's not, oh, this belongs to, let's jokingly say Liz here. It's not saying that it belongs to Liz. It belongs to my darling. And Rissa knows this smell, but we don't know what that smell is. So there's sort of a possessiveness. If you were to think about an intimate detail about your romantic partner. So again, maybe at the end of the night, they take a shower and then their hair smells like coconut, you would maybe not want to share that with someone else because you're possessive of that romantic partner. So that's like a detail you would keep to yourself. Similarly, by telling us that there is a smell, but not telling us what it is, this could be the smell of strawberries, it could be the smell of cigarette smoke, it could be anything. We don't know. So Nerissa is therefore keeping us sort of away from this wife, bride, lover, interest type person. And I think that contributes to the overall characterization of our sort of speaker. So again, because there's sort of that complicated play of, writing isn't always, how do I want to say this? Writing isn't always actually true to the writer. You can take on different voices and different personas. And, if you write from the perspective of a murderer, you're not actually a murderer. So here we can't actually say, oh, well, we know who Nerissa is through her streams. We know the character of this, half demon, half raven. This could be someone entirely different, and Nerissa's just presenting their POV to us through this piece of writing. So in a piece in a part of a poem or anything like an intro, you're going to want to be paying close attention to these sort of questions of like who, what, when, where, why. Who's telling us this story? Why are they telling it? What are they telling? Where does it happen? Stuff like that. So this intro, again, serves to contribute to the characterization. It's sort of long-winded, but I wanted to emphasize how much this actually is happening and how cool it is, and not just sort of blow off the intro in that way. We also learn that they're possessive through the fact that it's sort of like much more of it. So if they can get closer to get more of this smell, they're going to be smothering their darling in kisses. It's also interesting that it sort of switches, because at first the passage seems like it's speaking to maybe someone else than the darling, because it's saying, oh, I know that smell. It belongs to my darling. But it shows that sort of the way that this character's attention then switches quickly over to their other person. They're suddenly like almost dropping the conversation that they were having with potentially someone else by saying, oh, I know this smell. It smells my darling. Now they're just talking to their darling, because they're switching by saying, I'm going to smother you in kisses. Oh, wait, my love. I can't stop. Rissa's almost there. Now, as for the ending, I definitely think that there's a bit of an innuendo going on here, as that phrase is often used in a different context. But I also think it's, sort of like a double entendre in that it also is implying that there's sort of a pursuit happening. She's having to say, wait, my love, which implies that the other person is going in the opposite direction and is potentially running away. And then Rissa's here saying, wait, I'm almost there. I'm almost caught up to you. And, once I catch up to you, I'm going to smother you in kisses, etc. So we have to ask ourselves, why is the other person seemingly going in the opposite direction and trying to separate themselves from Rissa here instead of going towards her, because if this was a normal two-party relationship, you would almost think it'd be like, oh, hey, there's my lover, let's both go and meet in the middle and smother each other in kisses. But we're getting something very differently here. So let's jump into the next passage. And so now we have our first verse, and this goes, "Think my body might overheat, because when I look at you, my heart can't help but skip a beat. Your eyes that shine and dazzle, soft lips that get me frazzled, the lovely way you smile, ah. Past the point of no turning back, yeah, I've been struck by Cupid, all my sense goes boo, 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 boom. This overflowing love's so hard. Feel it coursing through me like a heat that I can't disregard." And in regards to the rhyme scheme, as always, I'd like to start with that. So here we have sort of a combination of her sort of writing style where we have overheat and skip a beat. But then we have shine and dazzle, soft lips that get me frazzled. So that's sort of your BB, which again implies that there's actually supposed to be a line break here. And then we have the lovely way you smile. Past the point of no turning back, yeah, I've been struck by Cupid, all my senses go boom, 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 boom. This overflowing love's so hard. Feel it coursing through me like a heat that I can't disregard. So here we have sort of a B, B. Well, we would say put this as a D, E, F, C, C sort of rhyme scheme. So sort of interesting. I'm very curious why sometimes there's these line breaks and why other times there isn't. For example, with Cupid and boom, but again, there doesn't actually have to be a rhyme scheme. This is a song. It's not actually a poem, but it's just kind of fun to sort of dive into the writer's sort of thinking and trying to understand and sort of reverse engineer how they think while they write. But let's get into the actual lines. Now, I think what's sort of interesting is this passage sort of is playing a bit with the, let's say, the symptoms of love. Because something that's sort of interesting about the way that we write about love is we often write about the symptoms of love as being sort of like almost negative symptoms. Saying things like your heart skips a beat or my heart stopped, stuff like that. Those are all like actually medically really bad, but it's still how we write it. So I think it's sort of interesting. So right now we have, I think my body might overheat because when I look at you, my heart can't help but skip a beat. I mean, it's technically a heart palpitation. I'm getting frazzled. And then this overflowing love so hard. Feel it coursing through me like a heat that I can't disregard. Technically speaking, a heat coursing through you is almost sounds negative because in any other context, a lot of this could be describing some sort of fever / again, like heart issues. But here they're being described as symptoms of love. And I think that's sort of being played with here because again, this is sort of a, I don't know. I think there's a strong degree of irony in this piece. It isn't, as earnest, let's say, as some of her other writing. And I think we're supposed to sort of find comedic value in some of this. I also think it's funny, again, we got some innuendos like, because, if you're in heat, that's a whole other thing. I think that specific word choice is intentional. But you also have it again of think my body might overheat. Overheat is all the more negative. And again, I think that therefore plays into this sort of like maybe a little obsessive, sort of maybe a bit of a scary lover vibe. Because we got in the last passage that the romantic interest may be running away while Rissa chases them. And here we have some of the symptoms here are almost concerning, let's just say. But something else I want to look at in terms of this whole thing of things almost being in disbalance is one of the sort of not cliche points that we talk about in poetry, but just something you will, if you take a poetry course, one of the first things you're going to hear is that iambic pentameter is one of the most common rhythms and beats in poetry, and that it mirrors the beating of the heart. So it goes unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. And so there's actually 5 of these patterns here, but they're actually each their own beat. And so like Shakespeare's written this way, and like most sonnets, and just like tons and tons and tons of writing. Even writing today can be written in this, but it goes way back. And so the unstressed is actually having to do with the pattern and the beats of the language. And it's actually very challenging to hear this sort of rhythm at first if you're just starting to get used to poetry. Because at first it sort of feels like you can stress or unstress any word technically, especially when you have just a word on its own, like skip. Is skip, that's probably stressed. You could stress it, but is it? And same with but, because you could say it in a phrase like, I was going to go to the store, but I realized I didn't have any money. See how you're stressing the but you could also not stress it, as it is here, where I think it's sort of a, you could argue it's but skip beat. So the here is unstressed, and then beat is stressed. But you find out in more words like lasagna and stuff like that, where you kind of find out what parts you naturally stress. Anyway, this is said to mirror the beating of the heart because it goes ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. So you can hear sort of a heartbeat there. So why does that matter? I think it's sort of interesting that here we have boo, 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 boom, in that this doesn't mirror that sort of ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-boom. It could have been written as ba-bum, 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 ba-boom. Although also in terms of singing, that might seem a bit more awkward. I still think it's warrants once again pointing out that there's sort of, if this is the heartbeat and the senses going boom, 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 and this, the heart is skipping a beat, this also is breaking that rhythm and mirroring that detail, because we've been told that the heart is skipping a beat, and now we have it skipping a beat here where we're actually getting this sort of the sound and the musicality of the heartbeat. And I think that's just really cool. I want to give credit to that. Is the way that this passage mirrors this passage. And again, what's being mirrored is that there's these sort of symptoms of love that feel a little off, which then contributes to the overall sort of tone and vibe of this being sort of a kind of obsessive, very intense love. Also, just for some of the other language here, we get your eyes that shine and dazzle. So now we're getting some details, but again, they're still sort of in intentional distance. Soft lips. So soft lips implies that you have felt them before, so that could tell us potentially that there may be some history here that may now be potentially not returned, but it maybe at one point was. The lovely way you smile. Again, we're just hearing that the person smiles, but we're not getting too much detail. And again, I'm not criticizing it for not giving detail. I think that it not giving detail is actually helping it accomplish its objective. But then again, with the sort of obsessiveness, we get past the point of no turning back. Yeah, I've been struck by Cupid. This overflowing love sword. So I feel like there's, again, with this obsessiveness, there's also sort of this like no control, which kind of contributes again to it being this sort of intense, maybe a little scary vibe, in that they're basically absolving themselves of responsibility to a degree by saying like, I'm already past the point of no, I can't turn back anymore. So basically, might as well get on board. It's not my fault. I was struck by Cupid. And then these sensations are so powerful and overflowing and they're coursing through them like a heat that they can't disregard. So again, there's sort of this interesting language if you can almost see that they're almost like resisting a voice that we can't hear, where if you were to picture someone trying to confess their feelings to someone else, and then that other person is like, oh no, please don't. And then that the first person says, but I can't help it. I just, these feelings, they're overwhelming me and overflowing in me. And then the other person once again is like, okay, yeah, but ignore those feelings. And then the first person is like, no, I can't disregard it. It's overflowing. It's coursing through me. My heart's skipping a beat. I'm going to explode. There's sort of almost a back and forth going on here, but we're only hearing one side, which almost implies that this conversation may have happened before. And so now Nerissa's character is almost predicting person number two's sort of resistance and is now coming up with their own excuses where it's like, well, if you tell me to ignore my feelings, well, I can't, because I can't disregard them because they're coursing through me. Do you see what I mean? There's sort of this almost conversation happening. Then we get our pre-chorus, which goes, hello, precious kitten, you can drop the coy disguise. Hey, don't you turn away from me, just look me in the eyes. Come here. Forecast is clear skies, no pan sensors all powered up. Oop, hee hee, I found you. And, to point out the rhyme again, we have disguise and eyes. So here there's not really that line break. And then we also have skies, so maybe there's supposed to be a line break here, or it's just an internal rhyme. I don't want to read too much into that. Since it's all powered up, oop, hee hee, I found you. I think that's it for rhyme. So in our first line, we have hello, precious kitten, and precious kitten here is sort of like a affectionate nickname. And it's again showing that our speaker sort of believes that they have that familiarity to be using nicknames. But then we get this switch here where you can drop the coy disguise. So again, we find out that this other person number two, is hiding to some degree and using a disguise and is at the very least trying to avoid Nerissa's character here, if not truly genuinely hide. And then we get sort of these asides that are in parentheses of, hey, come here, which are a bit more like forceful and sort of show a little bit of the mask off moment because, hello, precious kitten, that sounds so friendly and nice. But then we get sort of this more forceful, hey, come here, which, again, mask off. It seems like it's like the real voice coming through. Don't you turn away from me. It's very commanding. Where's the precious kitten vibes here? Don't you turn away from me. Just look me in the eyes. Also, look me in the eyes is sort of a, it's a command. It's also sort of a controlling thing. Because we also sort of think of looking into someone's eyes as being intimate, but also sort of like, if you think of like hypnosis and sort of control, mind control, a lot of that stuff has to do with the eyes. We often depict someone who's under someone's control as through the eyes. And there's also a degree of truth in the eyes. We think of blind prophets. Because they're blind, they can see a better truth, or you use your eyes to look for clues. The fact that we say look for clues shows how important eyes are when it comes to finding the truth. And so if you're trying to hide the truth and hide in a disguise and stuff like that, but you're being then forced to look at someone in the eyes, it's harder to hide, it's harder to lie. So it's sort of a interrogation in a way. And then we have this next passage, which is a bit more cryptic. This is one of the more challenging passages. So here, let's get a different color chalk. So here we have forecast is clear skies. So this can be referring to the sort of sensor and the sort of this whole looking, because if the forecast is clear skies, you can't really hide behind clouds, let's say. So it's clear, again, it's clear out in the open, that type of stuff. But it's also sort of has to do with like the idea of forecast is clear skies is often means it's sort of an omen for the right time to start a journey, or it's sort of a sign to move ahead with something. If you want to go somewhere, travel somewhere, start a project, start some sort of endeavor, if the forecast is clear, that sort of means like you have the green light to go ahead. So this could also be sort of saying of like the relate towards the relationship that the forecast is clear skies. And we got oop, which is sort of a Midwestern reference. It's sort of a thing you say when you're like almost bumping into someone, or you're gonna pass them, or ironically, when you find someone, if you walk into a room and you're looking for something, oh, there you are, that kind of thing. So again, that's also sort of contributing to the characterization again. All of these language choices tell us things about who is speaking, who the speaker of this poem is. So we know that they're Midwestern, we know that they're a little intimidating, maybe a little crazy in love. We know that they potentially have been rejected or by this other person by some of the ways they describe the other person and the way they're sort of confessing that they can't stop these feelings. All this stuff contributes to characterization. And then again, we get the I've found you, which implies that the other person was hiding, which, you know, we got already earlier with the coy disguise and don't turn away from me. But now we've got I've found you. So if we weren't sure in the previous passage, in the intro where she's saying, just wait up, I'm almost there, that implied that the other person was running away. Here, we're definitely getting confirmation that this other person is kind of running away and hiding. As for the no pan sensor, this part's a bit cryptic because at first when I heard this and I wasn't looking at the lyrics, I thought it was censor spelled with a C, and it was sort of, you know, I don't know, censoring something. But then we have that it's also all powered up. So this seems to be the device that our main speaker is using to help sort of search for the other person. So the no pan sensor helps them find people. I don't know if this is also, I mean, I think this could be, I'm trying to think of the etymology of like deadpan. Let me pause this for a second and look that up and see if there's any truth to that. So apparently pan was a 1920s slang word for face. So when someone's deadpan, they're dead-faced, which means they have no expression. Or if it's like a deadpan joke, someone says the joke without laughing and smiling, so it's delivered without any facial expression. Did not know that pan, I don't know if that's what's being done here, but what I'm saying is that I used to do this all the time in my college courses where you would get out the Oxford English Dictionary and you would look up pretty much every single word and you would look at their etymology and their first usage and you'd sort of try to see how far back you could go. And then you would make your argument. So you would say whether you think it's, you know, if you thought this had something to do with like a frying pan or something like that, you would have to argue and explain why you thought that. And so here, I think you could make an argument that pan here could be referring to this sort of deadpan face thing, because no pan almost is sort of could be argued to be a play on deadpan, where they're looking for this person. So they have a sensor, because again, it's not sensor with a C, it's a sensor is like a scanner. And so it's scanning for a face. And then once it's all powered up, they're able to find the other person. And potentially the other person has no real expression on their face since they're using disguises and hiding. Which actually is extremely interesting. I just realized, see, this is where I would then make this is where the hill I would, die on in my college English essay. Originally, I was reading this as the other person is like afraid of Nerissa, or Nerissa's character in this, and so they're running away and hiding, and they're wearing disguises. However, there's the use of coy disguise, and the fact that the other person is turning away from her and that they aren't looking her in the eyes. So, what's a coy disguise? If you picture you go to approach someone and you want to talk to them, and they just look at you blankly, and then they turn away and completely ignore you, you could describe that their face as being deadpan in a way. Or even better, no pan. You could describe it as they have no facial expression, because deadpan actually has the connotation of humor, of a deadpan joke. But with that, no pan is sort of no expression on their face. It's no face. That technically could be described as being a coy disguise. If the other person thinks there's something there that there isn't. So as placeholder terms, if Nerissa, so let's get blue. So if Nerissa is here and she thinks that, let's say as a placeholder, Liz is in love with her, but Liz doesn't feel anything for her. So there's actually this wall here, but Nerissa thinks, oh, hey, this is my lover. I'm going to go up and approach her. And she goes, hey there, precious kitten. And then Liz, who doesn't know Nerissa in this example, if she were to then turn away and just sort of be like, oh, hey, whatever, and then keep talking to, say, Cecilia, who's in green here, and ignore Nerissa, if Nerissa is still delusional and thinks that Liz is in love with her, then she's going to be like, oh, what a coy disguise, but don't turn away from me, just look me in the eyes. So yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. I think that there's an argument to be made there as to that's what that's sort of referring to. And again, there is still sort of the pursuit of I've found you, but also forecast is clear skies. That kind of also ties into a faceless sky because it has no clouds or anything. Kind of fits with an emotionless face. I think a lot of this ties together. So yeah. So then we get chorus 1, which goes, here I am, bursting at the seams to tell you how I'm feeling. Love you, baby, won't you marry me? You're my one, my only shining princess. Yeah, I won't let you go. Wedding bells are ringing and the guests are waiting. God himself can't stop me. Yeah, I'll make you mine. We'll have a perfect honeymoon. You'll be mine. Yeah, I'll get you. Holic for my waifu. Chew. So I'm going to be annoying as always and start with the rhymes. So we have bursting and feeling. We have baby and me. We have ignore this you over here. So we have baby and me. We have you're my one, my only also sort of rhymes with me. Shining princess. Yeah, I won't let you go. Wedding bells are ringing and the guests are waiting. God himself won't stop me. Yeah, I'll make you mine. We'll have the perfect honeymoon. You'll be mine. Yeah, I'll get you. Waifu. Chew. So lots of rhymes here, which, makes sense since it's a chorus. But yeah, I think, after hearing that first reading, you can see again how sort of obsessive the language is here and also how intense. Bursting at the seams to tell you how I'm feeling. So this reveals that, she hasn't said it yet. She hasn't yet told her feelings, but the next thing she says is love you, and then jumps all the way to marry me, says you're my one, my only shining princess. yeah, you know, I won't let you go. Wedding bells are ringing and the guests are waiting. God himself can't stop me. And, you know, an expression like that makes you ask, well, why would God want to stop Nerissa here? You know, if this was a normal relationship where both parties were totally on board and were both at an equal level of intense love, they wouldn't say something like, God himself can't stop me. That implies that others are trying to stop, and then Nerissa is actually using exaggerative language to emphasize how much you can't stop. So, for example, if I really wanted to get a slice of pizza from, you know, the local pizza joint, follow me with this. So I want to get a piece of pizza from the local joint, but I've been kicked out. And so the manager is like, or let's say an employee is like, you know, you're not allowed back in this pizza joint. You can't get in. And I say, you know, let me in. And they're like, no, I'm going to get the manager, and the manager won't let you in. And I say, you think the manager could stop me? God himself can't stop me. So do you see how you elevate it and you exaggerate it to a higher degree to show, you know, just how much you can't be stopped? So in that sense, I'm actually referring to how the manager can't stop me, but I'm exaggerating by saying, if you think the manager could stop me, but God can't even. So here, I think there's someone else besides God here that might be trying to stop this. And Nerissa here is saying, well, you can't stop me because even God can't. There's sort of an implied even there. Yeah, I'll make you mine. Possessive. It's not like, oh yeah, we'll fall in love. It's, I will make you become mine. We'll have a perfect honeymoon. Yeah, you'll be mine. I'll get you. Holic for my waifu. So sort of like addicted, if you think of it as almost like an alcoholic. That's sort of like holic is, you know, when you're addicted to something. So she's basically an addict for her waifu. And then chew is like a kissing sound effect. So yeah, this whole chorus is just full of like kind of like almost malicious, or like I'm thinking of that like Stephen King book about the like obsessive fan, where it's like there's subtext to everything, where, you know, at first it sounds almost kind of sweet, where it's like, oh yeah, I love you, won't you marry me, you're my princess, I won't let you go, and the wedding bells are already ringing and the guests are waiting, I'll make you mine. But then you start to actually realize again how all of this could be read in a much more sort of ominous tone. Also using the present tense, so wedding bells are ringing and the guests are waiting. This almost implies that like Nerissa has like set up a wedding without the other person knowing. So it's sort of like, hey, I love you, and also we're getting married today, and you know, you can't run away from this because the guests are already waiting. Also, sort of by saying the guests are waiting, there's also sort of like a subtle guilt trip vibe there, where it's also kind of like you can't run away because everyone is already, you know, the guests of a wedding are usually family, so it's almost implied like your whole family is already on board for this wedding, so you're not going to find an ally in them, because if you're like, oh, I'm going to run away from you and, you know, my mom and dad will help me escape from this obsessive lover, if you find out that your mom and dad are sitting in the church waiting for you to get married, then that implies that they're already on Nerissa's side and they've already agreed to this wedding and everything. So you know, you're not going to find any allies there. So it's sort of an isolating sort of expression too, in a way. And we're already talking about the honeymoon when this passage started by saying that, like, you know, I want to tell you how I'm feeling. And now we're already planning the honeymoon. And again, you'll be mine and I'll get you. This one especially feels ominous, since the other ones are almost a play on words and a play on phrases of, like, you know, that's like a very common sentiment in love songs of being like, oh, I'll make you mine. I'll steal your heart. Like there's weird language around love because stealing a heart sounds like you're taking something from the other person, which almost sounds like you're removing their agency to a degree. But here, just saying, I don't think I've ever heard "I'll get you" used in a unironic love song. So again, I think there's sort of an ironic sort of, playfulness here. And yeah, and then it ends with the kiss sound, which almost seems like then Nerissa has fully caught the person and is now, as she has been promising, smothering them in kisses. And then we get a spoken break, which goes, hee hee, darling, I'm home. Don't I get a welcome back kiss? Mwah. Now, should I go have dinner, maybe a bath, or maybe you? And so with this, again, we're just getting these sort of, we're getting the playful language, and that this is very much now pretending that the couple has gotten married at the wedding. So now they're, a married couple, and Nerissa has come home from work, and she's come home to her housewife who, then she wants a welcome back kiss from, and then the classic like have dinner and a bath, dinner on the table sort of vibe, or maybe you, the playfulness of having you instead of dinner or a bath. But also there's once again a very much like a one-sidedness to this, because all of this is just being said by Nerissa. So it's not that it's like, oh, hello, darling, I'm home. And then you hear, oh, welcome home. And then the other person normally would say like, oh, welcome back home. Here's a kiss. Mwah. But instead, it's Nerissa's character who is saying, don't I get a welcome back kiss? So she's now forcing this onto the second person. And then Nerissa continues to monologue here by saying, now, should I go have dinner? Maybe a bath, or maybe you. Now note also that none of these were offered by the second person, so do we know if the second person already made dinner or drew up a bath for Nerissa, or is Nerissa just assuming that their stay-at-home wife in this scenario would have had dinner and a bath ready, or would be interested in sort of a romantic moment? So it's just a funny passage, and again, I think it's funny the more we get into this, seeing how one-sided all of this is. And then we get verse 2, which goes, today I've planned out a super special shopping date. Darling, are you ready to go? Darling, wherever did you go? Could it be that you wanted to play a game of hide and seek with me, hiding under the table, or maybe you're in the closet? If you won't come out, I'll have to get serious. No pan censored, no pan, no pan, no pan, no pan. I hear the gentle rhythm of your heart. By following the string of fate, I'll find your secret hiding place. My heart can hardly wait, so come on, baby. Ha 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 ha, I've found you. This is an extremely fun song, and I'm bummed that I didn't make this video before today, just because I'm having a blast covering this. So we start off with, once again, Nerissa is in the illusion of this sort of, married couple at home. So, she's saying, oh, should we have dinner? Should I take a bath? Maybe I'll have you. And then she's again sort of monologuing to herself within that illusion of, oh, today I've planned out a super special shopping date. Darling, are you ready to go? Now, if this was normal, the other person would be like, yay, I can't wait to go. That sounds wonderful. But instead, through the dialogue, through the monologue, we're able to find out that this person has actually gone and hidden from Nerissa, but in Nerissa's delusional state, she thinks, oh, well, my lover definitely wouldn't try to actually hide from me, so it must be that they're just trying to play a game of hide and seek. And then through this line, we actually get sort of like stage directions, almost in a way, because through the monologue, we can see what Nerissa's doing on stage. So she's looking under the table and then gets up. The person's not there. Then she starts to slowly go over to the closet and say, maybe you're in the closet. And you can almost see the doors quickly being thrown open and they're not there. And then there's this very scary line of, if you won't come out, I'll have to get serious, which is just a very fun, like, almost feels like like playing a horror game like Biohazard or something. And then we have this mysterious no pan sensor again, which I'm sticking with that meaning, basically like a no face, because also no face is often tied to a sort of like lack of emotion. And if we think of romance as an emotion, then we can almost see it as being like, nope, the sensor is scanning for someone who is failing to exhibit enough romantic emotion on their face. So it's sort of like if you were with like a a toxic date and the person kept being like, hey, you're having fun, right? And you're like, yeah, I'm having fun. Why are you asking? And they're like, it didn't look like you were having fun. But yeah, so you get the vibe that this potentially is sort of like it's not that the sensor helps find potentially, but it's more just find anyone, but it's more that it's detecting someone who isn't exhibiting romance on their face. So if you're hiding, if you're over here and you're hiding and you're not looking all happy and in love, then you're going to be detected, and then Nerissa's going to be able to find you. Again, that very well may not be what that means, but I feel like I could make a convincing literary essay and analysis about this and still get that A+. And then we get that she's listening to the gentle rhythm of your heart. So also think about how scary that would be to hear if you were hiding from someone and they said that they could hear your heartbeat, and especially your gentle heartbeat, because gentle implies that it's like a quiet heartbeat. So you're hiding and someone's like, I can hear your heartbeat. That is terrifying. And then by following the string of fate. So again, there's sort of this like, along with the illusion, there's a delusion of it being this romance that's faded, because again, these were all feelings that she couldn't disregard because there's sort of this heightened sense of fate and sort of destiny here. And so Nerissa believes that she can follow the string of fate and then find her lover's secret hiding place. And, my heart can hardly wait. So come on, baby. There's also sort of an interesting, like recurring image and detail of Nerissa's heart and how it like struggles when it's feeling the intensity of like romance that hasn't been confessed yet, but it also like whenever it's potentially being rejected, the heart starts to get hurt, and like her heart can't handle all of this, which also sort of plays into the whole sort of like guilt trip kind of vibe too, because if you're hiding and then someone's saying, oh, my heart can hardly handle it and can hardly wait, there's sort of like an implication of like you should come out because their heart is having palpitations. But also, since it can hardly wait, it's also this sense of anticipation, which also sort of has kind of a prey and predator hunt sort of vibe to it. And then we end with sort of maniacal laughing and I found you. So let's jump to the next passage and see how things are turning out. So then we get chorus 2, which goes, baby, my love is like a speeding car with no brake pedal. Love you, baby, won't you marry me? Right here is our lovely, lavish wedding bed. You won't get away anymore, can't run away. Promise me eternal, everlasting lovin'. Praise to God for making you, hallelujah. We'll come together, take my hand, we'll fly high to heaven. So here we get some interesting imagery. So Baby, my love is like a speeding car with no brake pedal. And at first, it just seems like, okay, yeah, it's a car that's going super fast and it's incapable of slowing down. So my love is a super fast car that's incapable of slowing down. That actually sounds very like devoted. It's sort of saying, if you had a car without a brake and you said, my love will end for you when the car breaks, it's like, oh, well, it can't break. So, wow, your love, will never slow down. Your love will never break. However, there's that double meaning of a speeding car with no brake pedal is also extremely dangerous. So, it's intentionally using, for your simile, you're intentionally using this device to explain that your love is both very intense and speeding fast, but also clearly brings to mind a sense of danger. Then we have this next part, which is sort of further escalating what we saw in chorus 1. So chorus 1, we had a proposal, and then we God, I spelled that wrong, proposal, and then we had the images of wedding bells, and then we got sort of a almost future dream sequence of when they're married and she comes home and dinner's on the table. But now we jump back to the sort of wedding where now we have the honeymoon that was also mentioned, and we have now the wedding bed, which consummates the marriage and then makes it, that's sort of like how you sign the contract, if you will, and make it permanent. So this is the moment where you can't get away anymore, can't run away. So again, as we've said over and over again, there's this implication of if you say you won't get away anymore, that means that we can't see. So off camera, this second person has been trying to get away and has been failing. We've never actually heard the perspective of this other person. We've never actually seen them on stage, if you will. And like I said, Nerissa was even sort of elusive with her descriptions, so we didn't get to be like, oh, well, this is a person who smells like strawberries, so we could feel like we know them, because this second person is all hers and she doesn't want to share this other person with us, the audience. And that's why we never get to see them or hear their perspective. However, through Nerissa's perspective, and again, this is the character that Nerissa is personifying and playing and sort of adopting for this poem/song, through the character Nerissa's perspective, we're seeing that this other person this whole time has been trying to run and hide and use disguises and avoid her at all costs, but has now effectively been captured and can't run away anymore. And then we get this next part, which sort of once again plays into this sort of like destiny and fate, because we're getting a praise to God for making you, hallelujah, which is again a praise to God, which plays into that this is like a divinely, ordained marriage. This is, co-signed by God, and therefore this is destiny and fate, which goes into, again, the whole like illusion and delusion of Nerissa's character here. And then we'll come together, take my hand, we'll fly high to heaven. This is sort of an innuendo with the lavish wedding bed, but also is sort of a recklessness of, flying high to heaven. That also is dying in a way, which also dying is sometimes an innuendo, but that's enough of that for this somewhat PG video, PG-13. But dying is when you go to heaven. So there's, again, sort of like this danger of a speeding car with no brake pedal. There's this sense of danger. And so this is almost in a way sort of a threat, sort of like how we got sort of a veiled threat before of you better come out from hiding or else I'm going to have to get serious. And it's like, if right now if you thought she was scary right now, she's going to get a whole lot more scary. And also there's sort of this sense of, since this isn't her trying to be serious, as in like the second person is hiding and now she's getting serious because she wants to find the other person to control them. In her fantasy of them actually coming together romantically and uniting as one, the end result of that is still going high to heaven, which, again, on the one hand, the phrase means like, oh, well, that's just sort of an expression of like, oh, it'll be just like heaven. It'll be like paradise for us to be together. We'll be so happy. Everything will be wonderful. But there also is that subtext of going high to heaven technically means dying. So lots of interesting wordplay here. And, I didn't talk about rhyme in this one because there isn't as much rhyme, but there's definitely a lot of still like repeated sounds like Ellen, love, love you, love, lovely, lavish, lasting, lovin', hallelujah. So we're still getting like these repeating sounds, like here, love you, here. They all sort of like keep the thread going and connect your lines. So it's sort of a good example of how you don't always need to have rhyme, but you can use, because you can have a piece that has no rhyme and no repetition of sound, but it won't have as much musicality. But if you want to have the musicality but don't want to rhyme, you can do repeating sounds like this, where they don't actually rhyme with each other, but they still make it all sort of connect and unite together, which sort of also propels it forward, because when your ear hears L, 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 it starts to expect and anticipate the next L sound and the next L sound and the next L sound, which speeds up the way you read it and has this forward momentumness, which sort of mirrors here this sort of like, okay, we're at the wedding bed. It's, you can't run away anymore. You're at the final thing. There's no more escaping. Here we are. We're at the end. Like, sign the contract, sign your soul away kind of moment. So it all contributes to that, which is really cool. And then we get our bridge, which goes, I'd once been sealed away under lock and key, my love left to rot inside of me. You shone like rays of the sun, brought hope to where there was none. In sickness and in health, in poverty or wealth, I take you to have and to hold for life as my lawfully wedded wife. Love you till death do us part. There's no one in this world I love as much as you. So a bridge is always an interesting part of a song because it sort of serves a similar purpose to like a shift in a poem you often see with like a sonnet, where there's suddenly a change in tone or perspective, and it usually reveals more. So, if a sonnet begins with a question, then you have the shift and you get an answer. This is sort of where you get your context and sort of answer some of these questions of like, well, why is this person so obsessive? Well, how'd they become this way? All of this stuff. And here we get all these answers. So we find out that Nerissa's character here had once been sealed away under lock and key, and that her love left to rot inside of me. And this sort of feels like this love could be meaning towards multiple different things. It could be like her love of life, or just her ability to love. It could be her love of someone else, just in general, again, her love for herself, anything like that. It was left to rot inside of her. And so for a while, she had no capacity for love. Due to being sealed away and sort of like left to rot in this jail. But then this other person came and shone like rays of the sun and brought hope to where there was none. So it almost makes sense then why she would have such an obsessive love for this person, because they seem to have freed her from being sealed away and gave her hope and also restored her ability to love. And if you once could love tons of things, but then lost your ability to do so, and then suddenly find something that is, strong enough to sort of, instill feelings of romance and love, you're going to feel it probably all the more intensely, because it's like, wow, I haven't felt this feeling stir inside of me for a really long time. And then we get some wedding vows with in sickness and in health, in poverty or wealth. I take you to have and to hold for life as my lawfully wedded wife. Love you till death do us part. There's no one in this world I love as much as you. And I think what's interesting with this part too is, as I said earlier, there's such an interesting sort of like wordplay with romance where we say actually like some really weird things when we're trying to express love and affection. And wedding vows technically are kind of weird. So saying things like till death do us part, it's actually a romantic sentiment, but it's sort of like, well, why are we talking about death right now? Why are we even bringing that into the equation? And there's something sort of like almost sort of obsessive and possessive to a degree with that sentiment of like, until you die, you will be mine because you are my lawfully wedded wife. And I could spend all day discussing about how this sort of sentiment, especially with like feminism in like the 1950s and earlier. But that sort of sentiment of what a lawfully wedded wife was, because, we see this as being a romantic sentiment, but also since there is the degree of law to it, there is a degree of sort of being confined by this and how this can actually be sort of scary and territorial in that way. And so how that relates to this song is I think it's interesting that all the other passages are saying all these very like obsessive romance things, and we're finding out that the other person is running away and trying to hide. And so we're hearing these phrases that are sort of familiar where it's like, oh, I'm gonna get you, you'll be mine. Those sound familiar, but in the context of where we're seeing someone is getting chased, we can see how they're sort of scary and obsessive and stuff like that. Here, ironically, since it's the bridge, I feel like it's actually more earnest. Because we get this context of how the character of Nerissa in this one had a very sad and tragic and sort of traumatizing past. And, she lost her ability to love and then found this other person, and through them found hope where they previously had no hope. So this wedding vow of being like, you'll be mine for life, I'll be with you in health and poverty and wealth, I'll love you till death do us part. It almost feels like this love you till death do us part almost feels like it's paying back the sort of kindness of when this person shone like rays of sun and brought hope to them. They're like, well, since you brought hope to me, I'm going to return that favor by loving you until you die. But there still is, since we've seen all this other scarier context, and we know through the larger context that this you person probably isn't interested, we see that there's sort of this drama here of this earnest declaration of love. The other person's not interested, so as a result, the earnest declaration of love becomes a bit more ominous and a bit more obsessive and a bit more scary, if that makes sense. And then we get this third pre-chorus, which goes, baby, please don't go away again, don't leave me lonely. If you're not here beside me, I just can't go on. I'm saddened and lonely when you're not in tow, so promise me you won't let go. And so here we have, our usual rhymes of go and tow. And then we have, let's see, is there an internal rhyme here? If you're not here beside me, I just can't go on. Not really. We kind of get lonely, and lonely is repeated here. Again and lonely don't rhyme, so promise you won't let me go. So here is actually, if we thought that the bridge was earnest and sort of like mask off in a different way, this one is even more so, where we're really just seeing sort of a more earnest, desire for this other person to not go away. It's sort of like if we thought that Nerissa was potentially like a stalkerish-y, obsessive romance partner in the previous parts, here we're kind of getting their side of the story, and we're seeing that, if the other person leaves them, they're going to get lonely, and also as we saw on the bridge, if this person leaves them, then they'll probably be left to, have a rotted heart again. They'll be left to rot and lose their ability to love again. So that's why it's so important to them that this person doesn't leave them. If you're not here beside me, I just can't go on. I'm saddened and lonely when you're not in tow. So promise me you won't let me go. And here, so we can kind of understand the stakes for Nerissa's character. So again, with that characterization. So, we've seen that her character in this song is obsessively in love, but now we understand that, okay, if this person gets away, we can see how that will impact Nerissa's character. And it's tough because, just for the normal story play, the audience usually takes the side of the person who's trying to hide and get away, etc. But here you can't help but feel for Nerissa's character and sort of think like, oh wow, I kind of almost hope the other person doesn't leave them all alone, because that's actually really sad to think that if they've kind of played with her heart enough that she fell in love with them, and now if they leave, she's going to be sad and lonely, and again will likely return. I think it's also interesting that says, baby, please don't go away again. So there seems to have been, that this has happened before. Now this again could refer to the fact that this character seems to keep running away in a more present sense, like as of the last 5 minutes keeps running away and putting on disguises and trying to hide whenever they get a chance. But I also wonder if this could mean that there was basically, Nerissa and then the person. Nerissa's in jail, rotting away. The person finds them. They're together for a bit. Nerissa super falls in love. Then the other person leaves. And Nerissa, in order to cope with that, basically became obsessive and started. And then the other person's like, no, I don't like you that way. And Nerissa began to sort of like disregard what they're saying and be like, oh, you silly. Like, okay, but now let's go get married. No more running. Oh, it's so silly that you put on a mask and you're trying to hide. Don't make me get serious. And why she's doing that is sort of a coping mechanism to try to avoid her original trauma and trying to avoid going back to that state where she lost her ability to love anything. So, whether you think she's the good guy or the bad guy, you could definitely sympathize with her character here, which makes it a compelling character. I think that's one of the most important parts about writing a compelling character, is writing someone who you can kind of like put yourself in their shoes and sort of understand their motivations. So then we get this final chorus, which goes, here I am, bursting at the seams to tell you how I'm feeling. Love you, baby, won't you marry me? You're my one, my only shining princess. Yeah, I won't let you go. Don't go. Wedding bells are ringing and the guests are waiting. God himself can't stop me. Yeah, I'll make you mine. We'll have a perfect honeymoon. You'll be mine. Yeah, I'll get you. Holic for my waifu. Chew. I think what's interesting is this is so similar to one of the previous courses we've looked at, but reading it now with the extra context of the bridge and the pre-chorus, there's a different level of drama to it. And I mean drama in a sort of theatrical way of like there's a different sort of like plot and stakes and again, like character stakes here that we didn't have previously. Previously, it just seemed like, oh, here's this kind of, silly, stalkerish, obsessive character who's chasing someone. But now when we get this whole, I'm bursting at the seams to tell you how I'm feeling, baby, won't you marry me? You can read it differently. It's like, won't you marry me? ? Because again, if they don't, this Nerissa character is going to go back to a much darker place. You're my one, my only shining princess. Yeah, I won't let you go. Don't go. And while before you could read it as like, don't go, as sort of a command, here it almost feels like almost a cry for help and a sort of like just a crying out of being like, please don't go. Wedding bells are ringing and the guests are waiting. So now it almost feels like this line reads as being left at the altar. Where before it was like, oh boy, did this Nerissa character like schedule an entire wedding for this person who's not interested? But here, now it almost feels like from Nerissa's point of view, she's being left at the altar. So she's like, please don't leave me at the altar. God himself can't stop me. Yeah, I'll make you mine. We'll have a perfect honeymoon. You'll be mine, yeah. I'll get you. Holic for my waifu. Chew. And the we'll have a perfect honeymoon almost feels like this is a weird analogy, but it almost feels like the ending of A Mice of Men, where he sort of proceeds to read out sort of this dream, this American dream, where basically maybe Nerissa's character here knows that the other person is going to leave them at the altar, and they're still trying to say, they're like, oh, we'll have a perfect honeymoon, everything will be wonderful, you'll be mine, yeah, I'll get you, I'll make you mine, and everything will be good, and I won't ever have to go back to that dark cold cell. I'll never have to go back to that state of being so rotted inside that I can't even love. And yeah, it's actually like a super tragic ending in a way. You could maybe read it as at least that Nerissa's sort of hopeful that she's still going to get the other person, because she's saying God himself can't stop me. So, you know, you could think of that as her doubling down, but you could also almost see it as sort of like a false bravado, where she's sort of saying God can't stop me, but, you know, maybe she's actually sort of breaking and realizing that this isn't going to work out. And I think the reason why there might be sort of that false bravado is the bridge in the pre-chorus sort of implies a moment of lucidity in Nerissa's illusion. Because if earlier she had this whole illusion of, oh, we'll be married and I'll come home, you know, and I'll basically get a shoulder rub and then we'll go have dinner and all of that stuff. Here, the illusion is broken, and she's sort of reflecting on her past and reflecting on the fact that if this person does reject her, she's going to have to go back to that past. So here, when she's saying all these things, it's like, is she just putting on sort of a brave face, or is this real? And I guess it's open to debate in that sense. I sort of would argue in my essay that it's more of the brave face thing. And I think that ultimately makes this an extremely compelling piece, where we start off with this sort of just, again, kind of almost a caricature of an obsessive stalker, lover type person. And at the end, we see them as being a very sympathetic person, and we understand why they are the way that they are. But we also understand that the other person probably isn't going to change their mind and suddenly be open to you know, becoming the bride to Nerissa, and isn't going to be her wife, and we know the stakes of what that means. So bit of a sad ending here, but with that being said, I think I'm going to wrap this one up. So if you enjoyed this, if you like this sort of close reading analysis, please consider subscribing. It just helps grow the channel, which helps grow sort of our discourse in the comments, because I'd love to hear in the comments what your thoughts are. Do you agree with, you know, my no pan censor theory? Do you agree with my theory of the ending being actually quite sad? Or do you think it's just she returns to the delusion and sort of like almost had a moment of lucidity, but then snaps back into her sort of wifeaholic mode? Let me know what you think. I'd be really curious to see what you guys think. So yeah, with that being said, I'm going to wrap this one up. So take care, and I will see you in the next one.